Alright, so our weather page or our home screen is pretty much all set. What we want to do now is work on settings because we want to be able to change the default city. Alright, so first thing we're going to do is open up settings HTML and we need to put in our input form. So what I'm going to do is copy what we have in weather HTML. Okay, I want to grab this list with the label and the input. Okay, we'll go ahead and paste that in settings. Now I do want to use the grid system, so we're going to go ahead and do that. Let's say in grid. Okay, inside that we're going to want a row. And then inside that we're going to want a column. Let's say width dash 100. Okay, so now in here we can paste that list with the item, with the input, and let's change this to we'll say default city. Okay, key up, we're going to have get query. This is going to work just like the one on the home screen. We're going to use autocomplete. Let's see, ng model, search string, that's fine. Alright, now we're also going to want to display what the current city is. So right under the item, let's put a paragraph, and I'm going to give this a class of current. And in here we're going to say current colon, and we'll say default city. Okay, we also want a button here because although when we select it, it's gonna change it, but we want to be able to click the save button to redirect us and update the home page. Alright, so let's put a button right here. And let's say click save changes. Okay, we're going to make that block so it goes across the whole screen. Alright, let's save that. Okay, there's our settings. I want that text right here, current, to be white, so let's go ahead and say current color, which is going to be white. Alright, now we want this to have that same autocomplete drop down, so let's go to settings.js, and we're going to need to bring in the service. Alright, we're actually going to bring in a few things up here. Okay, we're also going to be using the nav controller, so we'll add that here. And we're also going to want on init. Okay, we'll bring in the service. Services slash weather dot service. Alright, we're also going to want the weather page because we're going to redirect to it. Okay, that's going to be at /weather/weather. Okay, so that's the imports. Now we're going to need to add the service as a provider right here. So we're going to say providers, which is an array, and we're going to pass in weather service. Okay, now in our class we're going to need our parameters function. So let's say static get parameters, and we want to return Okay, our nav controller and the weather service. Okay, now in the constructor we have to pass in nav and weather service. These are variables that we can now use. So we're going to set this dot nav equal to nav, and same thing with weather service. Okay, let's also define our search string and the default city. And results, which we're going to set to an empty array, and that should do it for the constructor. Now what we're going to want is we're going to want to run get default city, and we want to do that in our ng on init. Okay, so we'll just say this dot get default city. Okay, and then we'll create that. And for right now, we're just going to say this dot default city equals nothing. All right, so now let's do our get query. This is going to work just like on the home screen. Okay, we're going to say this dot weather service dot search cities, and we're going to pass in this dot search string, and then we're going to subscribe res, and let's say this dot results is going to equal res dot results. So we'll have access to results. So let's go to settings HTML. Actually, let's copy what we have in weather HTML. We want this list with the results, and let's copy that, and we'll go and paste that right under this list. Okay, and then this stuff here, we're not going to have choose city, we're going to have set default city. Alright, and then we'll pass in that result. So let's save that, go to settings. If I start to type in here, okay, we get the same effect. If I click something, we should get an error saying that we don't have a set default city function, which is right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and create that in settings.js. Okay, it's going to take in city, and let's just console log it, make sure that we're able to get it. Okay, so if we go here and let's say New York, if I click that, you can see it's giving us that city object. Alright, and I don't think I've even showed you guys this result yet, but you can see we get the city name, we get the ZMW right here, we get the latitude and longitude. Alright, so what we want to do is the city, we now want to add that to local storage. Okay, so it gets saved even if we get out of the browser, out of the application. Alright, so what we'll do first is check to see if we can actually use local storage. There are some older browsers that have issues with it. So what we're going to do is first set this dot results to just an empty array, and then let's do a check for local storage. Okay, to do that we can say if type of storage is not equal to undefined, and we're going to put an else, and let's say console.log local storage not supported. Okay, if it is supported, then we're going to go ahead and set a city value. So to do that, we can say local storage dot whatever we want to call it. We'll call it city, and we're going to set that to the city that's passed in. Now, the issue we have with this is that city is a JSON object, and we can't store JSON objects in local storage. It's only strings. So what we'll have to do is turn it into a string by saying JSON.stringify. Okay, that'll take a JSON object and turn it into a string. Then we can store it. All right, now what I also want to happen is I want the actual city name to show up here. We don't want it to stay as New Yo. Okay, we want it to actually be whatever we click on. So for that, we can say this dot search string is equal to city dot name. All right, and then what we'll do is call get default city. Okay, now we'll go up to get default city, and now we're going to check to see if that local storage city value is actually a thing, if it's defined. All right, so to do that, we can say if local storage dot city is not equal to undefined. Okay, so if it's not equal to undefined, that means it's set. So what we want to do is then set this dot default city to the city name. All right, now remember, the city that we get from local storage city, if we say local storage city, that is actually a string. Remember, because we turned it into a string before we saved it. What we want to do now is bring it back to a JSON object. So to do that, we can say json.parse. Okay, and then we want to grab the name, so we can say dot name. Okay, and then what we'll do is say else, and if it's not set, then we're just gonna grab that, and it's not going to be set. It's going to be set to an empty string. All right, so let's go ahead and save that. And let's see, do we have? Okay. All right, so what I'm going to do now is go to settings, and what's this? Let me reload. Okay, so we go to settings, and let's say we want New York. I'm going to click on that. All right, and now you can see here it says current New York City, New York. Now the way to check if local storage was actually set, we can click on sources down here in the console or in Chrome tools, and then let's click on let's see, actually, is it sources? No, resources. And local storage, click on that, and you can see that we have a key here of city, and then we have our value, which is basically a JSON string. So it is getting saved correctly. Now if we go back to weather and we reload, we're still getting Boston because we haven't implemented it on that side. So let's do that. Okay, we're going to go to weather.js, and right now if we go to get default city, we're just explicitly setting it to Boston, to the ZMW value. What we want to do here is check the local storage first. All right, so let's say if, it's going to be an if else. So we'll say if local storage dot city is not undefined, then we're going to set this dot ZMW to JSON.parse, remember, because we want to turn it back into a JSON object so we can get the name. Okay, then we'll add .name. I'm sorry, not name, ZMW. Okay, now else, then we're just going to set it to this. Okay, so there's two defaults. There's a default for the developer, which you could change this to whatever you want, and then there's the default that can be set by the user in settings. So let's go ahead and save that, and if it reloads, now you can see it's New York. Okay, now we have one more thing to do. If I want to change it, let's say to Miami, okay, you can see that it has changed. Even if I go to weather and reload, it changes, but we don't want to have to reload, so that's what the save changes is for. So let's go ahead and go to settings.js and say save changes, and we're going to be using the nav here. We'll say this.nav.setRoute, and we're going to pass in weather page. Alright, so that should do it. Let's go ahead and give it a shot. We're going to change this to Boston. Okay, save changes, and it redirects us and shows the updated city. Alright, so that's going to do it for this project. And as you saw with this API, it's really nice because you can get a ton of information. You can get 10-day forecasts and so on. So I would suggest that maybe you take it upon yourself and expand the application to include more information, more weather info. Just a little side project. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed this project, and I'll see you in the next one.